Hey, this is Jason Lovins from the Jason Lovins Band.
Hola, este es Rodney Mora.
This is Pete Strum.
This is Don Whitinga.
Hello, this is Jim Quails with 4-1 Quartet.
This is Ted Lee, and you are listening to the Grovecast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this another edition of the Grovecast. I am Brian Farmer, pastor of the Cherry Grove Church of the Nazarene here in Cadillac, Michigan, sitting in my office on the corner of South 29 Road and M55 West. And across my desk today, I can honestly say, and I mean this when I say it every time, but especially today, my honor to be with my friend, Dr. Ted Lee. He is in this week. It's a crazy week for us around here today. We've got assembly tonight and in the morning and a lot of things going back and forth, but wanted to take this opportunity to spend some time with Dr. Lee and let him share a lot of his story and what God's done for him. And I'm going to let him talk now instead of me talking all the time. How are you, sir?
Oh, I am fine, Pastor. And boy, I am honored to be here on this beautiful, beautiful day. And you are busy because the district assembly, you're hosting that assembly at your church and your wonderful people. So I'm just glad that whenever I can be with you, I'm happy.
We sure had a good weekend with you. Sunday, you were here, you and your wonderful wife, Beverly, and got to preach for us and got to eat lunch. And then you got to stay in Cadillac a little longer than you expected.
I really did, because we were going to go on up north. And after lunch, you said to me, you better stay here. And I said, I think I can make it. Well, boy, we got out on 131 and heading north, and we hadn't gone 3 miles till my wife said, we are not going any further. It was slick and bad. Yeah. And you know, Brian, I just can't get over how many of your people showed up Sunday morning when it was a solid sheet of ice.
I know.
We had a great crowd.
Yeah.
And when Beverly and I went back to the hotel, I'll let you talk here in a second.
No, you're fine.
But we went back to the hotel, and we're at a different church nearly every Sunday. Not every Sunday, but when we're home, we go to College Church on the campus of Olivet Nazarene University. But I'm usually out speaking somewhere. And my wife said, the unity in that church. She said, those folks like one another. Yeah. She said, you can just sense it. And you really can, Pastor. It's a great, great spirit in your church, and I'm so proud of you.
Well, I appreciate that from you very, very much. Thank you. And it's been the Lord. The Lord's been awful good to us, and some of the finest people that we've ever met ever in life are right here.
Well, I'm convinced. First of all, I love northern Michigan.
Yes.
And we love to come up to Cadillac, Charlevoix, Alanson, all through that area. And but the people up here, they're kind, they're laid back, but yet they know what's going on in the world. And I just like the people and the air. You know, you get out of, I lived in Kalamazoo for quite a while.
Okay.
And you get out of Kalamazoo and Flint and Detroit and get up here, the air is fresher and better for your lungs. I am convinced of that.
You definitely can. Even when the crops are being dusted, so to speak, it's still not bad.
It's
it beats
not
what
bad.
You have to deal with in the big cities and stuff. We kind of, a fellow in our church talks about this is kind of like the land that time forgot back in here because it's still kind of old-fashioned in the midst of all the things around us. And there's enough technology and advancement here. But,
absolutely.
It's just a great, relaxing kind of area to be in.
You've got a group of people that have never forgotten where they came from, where their roots were.
That is a fact.
And I love that. I respect that so much.
Yes, sir. That is a fact for sure. And we had discussed this way back in wintertime, first of the year, February maybe, when we talked and set that date. And I figured, okay, and we were talking about this.
Yes.
April 15th, it'll be at least 50 and sunny. And God said otherwise.
I told my wife, about 3 weeks or so before we were to be here. And we were in Florida at that time.
Yes.
So we were going over our calendar, the things I had scheduled. And I said, Beverly, you're going to like this. I said, we're going to be with Reverend Farmer and his people in Cherry Grove, which is a great church. And I said, we're going to be there the 15th of April. And I said, the birds will be singing. I said, the flowers will be popping up and the grass will be turning green. Boy, did we miss it. And then I don't even know if you know, I guess you do know this, but when we left you, we went back to the hotel and stayed there Sunday night and Monday night. Monday night too. And then we went to Crystal Mountain, which is not too far from here, for the Michigan district. You know, we're on the northern Michigan here, and the Michigan district had their pastors and spouse retreat at Crystal Mountain. Well, they'd planned for a beautiful springtime, and like I was talking about, and it was slick. The snow was everywhere. I mean, we had a good retreat, but nobody could enjoy it because of the weather. I mean, they couldn't be outside. Yeah. And it's a great ski area. I don't know if you ski or not, but I don't. But we got there, and of course, they got those ski runs everywhere, but none of them were being used. So when we checked in, I said to the lady at the reception desk, I said, "Are they skiing?" She said, "No, we shut it down April 1.
Oh,
she said,
we
shut it down way too soon. So
in this area, you just never know.
Oh, you never know.
It could snow. Yeah. I've only been here. This is my 5th year, but every May I've lived here, May, it's had some kind of snow. Now, I'm not talking a blizzard.
No, but you've had snow in May.
Technical snow, even. Yeah.
Oh, my word.
Even it's nice now. It's going to get nice next few days, but you still don't know. Well, you had a spill getting out of the parking lot.
I did. I tell you, we arrived at Crystal Mountain and checked into our room, and then they said at 3 o'clock they wanted us to go back to the reception area, and they were going to give us an order service, and when I was going to speak for Olivet and that kind of thing. So I said to Beverly, I said, "Hey, I'll be right back. I'm going to run over and get registered in and find out what the schedule is." And there was a little hill, not a steep hill, but a little hill. And I started down that hill, Pastor, and the next thing I knew, I was on my backside.
Oh, wow.
And I hit it was solid sheet of ice.
Yeah.
And my feet went out from under me, and there was a worker there at the retreat center. And he saw me laying on the ground, and he came over and he said, "Are you all right?" And I said, "Well, I think so." I said, "Let me lay here just for a second." And I said, "I'll see." So then I had trouble getting up because it was so slick, on my feet. But I finally got up. But soon as I stood up, I knew I was in trouble with this left arm.
Yeah.
The pain just shot down my arm and up through my neck. And so I kind of stood there for a minute or two, and I walked on over to get in to register and find out the times of the stations and everything. And it just got worse. And then that was on Tuesday. And Tuesday night, I never slept a wink all night long. I never slept. I was in constant pain. So the next morning, my wife took me over to a hospital, a little town nearby there. Can't even remember the name of it. I'm sorry. Just a small, sweet people, nice little hospital. And they took x-rays, and they came in and said, "Now, you don't have any broken bones, but we are afraid you've got a torn rotator cuff." Is that what they call them?
Yeah, rotator cuff.
Rotator cuff, yeah. And he said, "We do not have an MRI. We only have it once a week here." But he said, "Are you going to go home?" I said, "Yeah, in a few days." He said, "As soon as you get home, you must have an MRI because that will show if the tear is there and how severe it is." So, and then he went, he wasn't encouraging. He just said, "If you have to have surgery," he said, "it's really a painful surgery."
Thank you very much.
That's what I said to him. I said, I needed those words of encouragement. Thank you. So Beverly, bless her heart, she's had to help me put my shirts on and kind of get me going. And
you're going to have to be the road warrior this weekend because
that's true. I've got more places to go.
Right. You won't go home until when?
Well, we go home Monday.
Okay.
We go from here, the Northern Michigan District Assembly, and we leave here tomorrow afternoon, Saturday afternoon, and we go to Flint, and the Eastern Michigan District Assembly starts Sunday night and Monday.
Okay.
So we will head back home Monday afternoon. Right. And I'll be, as much as I love it up here, I'll be glad to get home because I've got to get to our primary care doctor and find out what's going on. But it really knocked me. And then I got kind of sick at my stomach with the pain.
Yeah.
And then they've given me some pain pills. I don't know what they're called, but
Yeah.
gave me some pain pills. And he said, now don't drive when you take those. So I said, well, I won't. So, but anyway, hey, I'm going to make it.
You didn't take one today because you drove over here.
I did not take one.
I don't want
today.
you getting in trouble with the doctor.
I did not take one. In fact, my wife asked me, she said, did you take one of those pills today? And I said, no. She said, wait till tonight when you go to bed. Don't take one because you got to drive. So,
Yes.
so I
Actually,
did.
that would have made an interesting interview had you taken one.
It would have.
Yeah.
By now, I would have been up on the ceiling, and you would have been saying, what's he doing?
We would have got pictures of that. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
Absolutely. So you live in Bourbonnais, Illinois,
We live
correct?
in Bourbonnais. I retired in 2011, if it's all right to give this, as what we call in our denomination a district superintendent.
Right.
And I served as a district superintendent for 16 years and 3 months. I always put those 3 months in there.
Hey, those were real months.
Those were real. And in Indianapolis, Indiana, called the Indianapolis District Church of the Nazarene. And so when I retired in 2011, we had built a home at Indian Lake in Vicksburg, Michigan, with our daughter and her family. And Bev and I lived, I called it the basement. My daughter said, Daddy, it's not the basement, it's the lake level, because it went out to Indian Lake.
Okay.
And I said, well, it's the lowest place in the house. I've always called that the basement.
Yes, sir.
But it was very nice. It was a nice place. And then I worked at Olivet, as you know, for 25 years before I became a district superintendent. And never wanted to be a district superintendent, but that's a whole other story. And when God leads, you have to be obedient to the Holy Spirit. And the people in Indianapolis were wonderful to us. So after I worked at Olivet for 25 years and started out as the first full-time director of the Alumni Association. And when I left, through the providence of God and good people, I was senior vice president when I left Olivet.
Sure.
And so I had great experience there. My wife worked at Olivet. She was director of student activities. She was also a resident director of a large upper-class ladies' residence hall. And I kid people and say to these men, you think you have it rough with a wife and daughter or two. I lived with 196 women. I was the only male species in the building, and I loved every minute of it.
You know how Custer felt.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. So I never thought we'd leave Olivet, but we did, and I became a district superintendent. And then when I retired from that in 2011, Olivet called me, Dr. Brian Allen, who took my place when I left Olivet. I hired him. Brian Allen is one of the finest men on planet Earth. He's the son I never had, and Bev and I love Brian.
Yes.
And so when I retired, he called me, and then the president, Dr. Bowling, who's a terrific man.
Yes.
You know, Brian, when graduation takes place on the 5th of May, he will have completed 27 years as president of that university. Phenomenal. So I got off my subject here.
No,
so Brian called me and asked me, he said, Dr. Ted, he said, will you come back and work? He said, you're too young to retire. I said, no, I'm not. I'm old.
Says
he
who?
said, yeah. He said, well, I want you to come back and work at Olivet. And I said, well, what do you have in mind? And he said, would you want to work full time? And I said, no. I said, I don't. So we go to Florida, January, February, and March, those 3 months. And while I'm there, I meet with alumni and prospective students. So I do work while I'm in Florida for Olivet. But I have a good job. My title is Ambassador at Large. And I go to churches, like I went to your church here at Cherry Grove last Sunday, and usually preach or give a report. I like to preach and meet the people, and I like to preach about 30 minutes on encouragement or something along those lines. Then after church, I like to shake hands with everybody that Beverly and I can get to. She goes one direction and I go to the other, and try to shake hands with as many people as we can. And then we get in the car and take the pastor and his precious wife and children, if he has children, out to Sunday dinner. and talk and laugh a little bit and then shake hands with them in the parking lot, and they go home and we go back home.
And
so it's a wonderful thing what Olivet has done to let me do that, to keep Olivet before the eyes of the people and let the people know that, hey, they care about us. They send somebody here to preach and to meet our young people. Now, I didn't meet your young people Sunday because the weather was so bad, but normally we try to get there early enough before Sunday school lets out to meet with young people in their class at Sunday school, just to pass out some literature and that kind of thing. So, it's a wonderful program. At the last General Assembly, I'm going to confuse your people. Every 4 years we have what we call a General Assembly in the Church of the Nazarene, and it was last June, as you well know, and one of the generals came to me. Well, it was Dr. Warwick, J.K. Warwick.
Okay.
And you know him well. And Dr. Warwick came to me and he said, hey, I want to talk to you, because he was retiring at that General Assembly. Right. He said, what do you do at Olivet? He said, I've heard bits and pieces. Oh, I said, I'm the janitor of this building and that building. Oh, no. He said, what do you do? So when I told him that I go out and preach and meet with pastors and take pastors out to lunch, and then on Sunday take the parsonage family out to lunch, and he said, oh, I love that. He said, Mid-America Nazarene University has asked me to come on board and do something like that.
Nice.
I said, J.K. or Dr. Warwick, you would be a natural at that, because he's a great preacher, as you well know. Yes. So he's doing that. So I kind of started that, I think, with our colleges, and I got to give Dr. Allen, Brian Allen, credit for that. It was his vision to have somebody out there doing that. And of course, I did that kind of work for all those years at Olivet. So kind of and Bev loves it, and I love it. So it's I'm with people like you, and your wife Cheryl, and Connor and Reagan. I mean, it's my joy. It's marvelous, and I see these kids across the country, and they'll come up and say, hey, I remember when we went out to lunch together, and that type of thing. And I don't always do it, but usually I try to have some Olivet t-shirts to give the pastor's kids and that kind of thing, to make them feel that we love them and care about them, which we do, which we do.
Sure.
So I went too long here. I'm sorry, Brian.
No, you did not. This is your podcast. Well, I just set the table. You eat.
Well,
but you're exactly right. I can tell that it's your passion, because don't you kind of feel like every area God's led you down has served you now in this role?
As the older I get, and I'm old, but the older I get, I tear up easy than I used to. And I can tear up thinking about that. Sure. Everything that God had, I grew up in the parsonage. My dad was a wonderful Nazarene pastor. And in fact, he became a district superintendent on the Indianapolis district, where I served for 16 years and 3 months. And a general superintendent told me there's only been 3 times that a son has been a district superintendent on the same district where his father served.
I wondered about that when you told me the other day. Okay.
Yeah. Now, they've been district superintendents many times, but not on the same district. There's only been 3 times. Talmadge Johnson, his dad was district superintendent of Southwest Oklahoma, and he was DS there. And I'm trying to think, Dr. Phillips in Iowa. And his son became DS there, and then my dad was DS for 10 years in Indianapolis, and I became the DS there.
Now, how long was your dad the DS there?
10 years.
10 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
And my dad was a good DS, and of course he's in heaven now. My dad was a good DS and loved people, but Brian, and wouldn't want anybody to take this wrong. I had a wonderful dad. He was good to my mother and good to my sister and me, but he missed the pastoral ministry. He never enjoyed being in administration and being a DS. Now, he did it because he was elected to do that job,
right?
But he really missed the people, one-on-one with the people, and being a pastor. Yeah. So anyway, let me get back. My wife and I met in high school. We were high school sweethearts. And my father was the Nazarene pastor in Richmond, Indiana, on the east side of the state of Indiana. And Beverly's dad owned a beer tavern in the city of Richmond.
Mhm.
So I tell the people sometimes, you think that didn't drive the local Nazarene church board bananas when the Nazarene pastor's son started dating her.
Yeah.
They had some long board meetings.
Yeah.
But God gloriously saved Beverly
Yeah.
and transformed her life in such a beautiful, beautiful way. You know, that's what God does.
Yes,
I mean,
he does.
He takes us from nothing and transforms us and gives us joy and peace. And we've been married. I tell people I came out of the womb married to her. We've
Well,
been married 57 years.
Yeah.
And but when I got out of high school, and not proud of this, I mean, I wasn't a bad kid. I wasn't arrested or anything like that. But I wanted my way, and I didn't want anybody telling me what to do. And my dad was on the board of trustees at Olivet at that time, and he and Mom had planned on me going to Olivet Nazarene University. And unbeknownst to them, I graduated from high school in June of 1960. And about the second week of July, I went down to the Air Force recruiter on a Tuesday and enlisted in the Air Force.
Wow.
Took my test, found out Wednesday, the next day that I'd passed. I think everybody passes that test, but I passed. And then Thursday, I broke the news to my parents that I was leaving on Friday.
Wow.
Broke their hearts. I could see my little 5'2" mother crying now. But, you know, I look back on it, and then Beverly and I got married a year after that, and she was at Indiana University. And people didn't give up on me. That church at Richmond, Indiana, Sister Seibert, Sister Masters, Louis Cordell, Basil Hinshaw, they wrote me nearly every week. They prayed for me every day. And so I got back to the Lord, and then Beverly found the Lord. Second time she had ever been in a service like that in the church. She found the Lord.
Wow.
And then we got married. And I went to Olivet then when I got, it's an interesting story. And I've only told this 3 times publicly, Brian, 3 times in my life, because so many people lost a son or daughter in the Vietnam War.
Right.
And I didn't want people thinking, well, who do you think you are?
Right.
So I'm no better than anybody else on planet Earth. But as I spent 3 years, and I was coming up to my 9th month, and I was stationed in Michigan, Selfridge Air Force Base, outside of Mount Clemens, Michigan, not too far from Detroit. And one day, I'd been in 3 years and 9 months, and the first sergeant, kind of a rough guy, he called me in, and he said, Airman Lee, and I was just an enlisted guy. I pumped gas in planes. That's what I did. And people say, what'd you do in the service? I pumped gas in airplanes. That's what I did.
Gotta have gas in
You
the
gotta
plane.
have gas.
Yeah.
So he called me in, and he had a piece of paper there, and he said, sign that paper. And I said, well, Sarge, what is it? Oh, he used some language that my mother would never let me use. And he said, what difference does that make? Just sign that paper. Well, I said, Sergeant, I'm not going to sign it till I read it. He said, you are going to sign it. Sign it now. Well, I looked at it, and I was re-enlisting for 4 more years.
Oh.
And I said, Sergeant, I'm not going to re-enlist. Oh, boy, Pastor.
Oof.
He stormed and used language that was not nice, and he said, you are going to re-enlist. I said, no, sir. I said, I'm not. Well, he stormed out of the office, and literally less than 24 hours later, the secretary of the commander of our division called me, Major Ingram. I still remember the guy's name. Yeah. His secretary called me. And she had never called me before. So she said, Airman Lee, she said, this is Major Ingram's office, and the major wants to see you in his office tomorrow at 1:30. And I said, is this a joke? She said, no, it's no joke. Well, I said, ma'am, why would the major want to see me? I'm just an airman second class. She said, I have no idea. He said to call you. So you have to be here tomorrow at 1:30. Well, it frightened me. I mean, I was scared to death.
Yeah.
So I went home and told Beverly, we had a little girl. She was about a year old at that time. And I said, Beverly, man, I don't know what's going on. Pray for me tomorrow. I'm scared to death. So 1:30, I was there, and the secretary took me in, and of course, I saluted, and he said, at ease, Airman, and so I tried to be at ease. And he kept looking down at a piece of paper, and so finally he looked at me, and he said, Airman, I understand you do not like the United States Air Force. Oh, I said, sir, I don't know who told you that. I said, that's not true. I said, the Air Force has been good to me. And I said, I've enjoyed the Air Force. I said, I like the Air Force. Well, he said, why are you not going to reenlist? Oh, I said, sir, I said, I'm going on to college. And he said, well, you can go to college in the Air Force. I said, I know. I said, I've taken 2 or 3 classes at Oakland University, and that's been good, but I'm going to a different kind of a college. He said, where are you going? And I said, well, you've never heard of it before, sir. I said, it's called Olivet Nazarene College. At that time, it was not a university yet, it was college.
Okay.
He said, Olivet Nazarene College. I said, yeah. He said, where's it located? And I said, well, Kankakee, Illinois. It's a town called Bourbonnais, but it's near Kankakee, Illinois. No, he said, I've never heard of that. And I said, well, I didn't think so. He said, well, do you know what you're going to be? I said, yes, sir. Well, he said, what are you going to be? I said, I'm going to be a minister. He said, a minister. He said, you mean a preacher? I said, yes, sir. I'm going to be a preacher. And I'm quoting him now. He said, my God, you'll starve to death. And I said, well, that may be, Major.
That could be prophetic.
That could be prophetic. I may starve to death. Yeah. Well, he said, why would you want to leave the Air Force? Why would you want to be a preacher? And I said, well, sir, you may not understand this, but I think God has called me into the ministry. And I'll never forget, he wasn't nasty, but he looked at me and he said, God called you. I said, yes, sir. He said, God talked to you? I said, well, I said, sir, not in a way like you and I are conversing, but I said, yes. I said, I sensed and felt the presence of God speaking to me to go into the ministry. And he said, never heard anything like that before. And so he looked down at his desk again. It seemed like an eternity, but probably 10 seconds or so, and I was just standing there. And he reached down in his desk and had a piece of paper, and he looked up at me and he said, Airman, he said, how would you like to get out of the Air Force 3 months early? And I said, well, sir, I can't do that. I enlisted for 4 years. He said, would it be a help to you to get out early? And I said, oh my, yes. I said, we've purchased a house trailer and we could get our trailer up to the college. And I said, my wife and I could start looking for work. I said, it would be a real blessing if we could do that. He took that paper, Brian, and he wrote his signature on it. And he handed it to me. And he said, you take that back to your first sergeant. He said, you'll be out of the Air Force in 4 days. Wow. He said, good luck to you, Airman.
My goodness.
And I saluted him and I left. And I went home that night and told Beverly, and we both cried. You know, God did that. I mean, it was God thing. Now, here's what I would never tell Brian, and I'm 70-some years of age now. Doesn't matter how old, but I'm in my 70s. And I would never tell this publicly. 30 days after I was discharged, in the Air Force, they're called flights. All of my flight, 80-some members of my flight at Selfridge Air Force Base in my wing that I was a part of, all of their discharges were frozen, and they were all sent to Vietnam.
Oh, my goodness sakes. Wow.
Now, that's why I won't tell that publicly.
I understand.
Now, if Beverly was here, and we have no way of knowing this, but she would tell you, she believes that major knew that was coming down the pike. And some way God spoke to him, even though I don't believe he was a believer like I think of believers. Yeah. And he knew I was sincere and was not trying to dodge anything. Right. And he let me out of the Air Force early. So it's an amazing thing. So I went on to college and 4 years at Olivet. Then went to seminary. You know, our seminary is in Kansas City. And I went to seminary and... do we have time for another little?
Absolutely.
I'm taking Brian. I am sorry.
This is what it's about.
I know these people out here in radio land. They're going to be bored to death.
No way.
But
no way.
I'd been at seminary 2 years. Beverly had a good job at headquarters, and our daughter, let's see, Debbie would have been about 5-6 years of age, I guess.
Okay.
So I'd been there 2 years, and it was on a Friday night, and I'd held a lot of revivals when I was in seminary, and it was on Friday night, and I was holding a weekend revival in Lima, Ohio.
Okay.
And you know where Lima is?
Yeah.
And I was staying, even though that's been 100 years ago, I still remember that I was staying in the Imperial 400 Motel. And 6 months ago, Beverly and I were in Lima, Ohio, just driving through, and went by. I said, Beverly, that's that hotel I was staying in back there.
Is it still the Imperial 400?
It's still the Imperial 400.
Yeah.
And it wasn't real nice when I stayed there. So anyway,
is it a 500 yet, or is it still 400?
Yeah, it ought to be a 100. It's Imperial 400 now. So that was before cell phones and all that. That was back in 1970. So I got into my room, and just as I walked in the room, the phone rang. And I thought, well, that's probably Beverly checking on me. So I went to the phone and said hello. And the president of Olivet Nazarene College at that time, his name was Harold Reed, a wonderful man. But when he was a child, he had polio, and it left his voice real weak. And he cleared his throat a lot. And so I said hello, and this voice said, Ted? I said, yes. He said, Harold Reed. And I thought some of my friends were playing a joke on me because he never called me before. Right. And I started to say, well, how's your old wife doing, brother? But I thank God I didn't. And I said, well, Dr. Reed, this is a pleasant surprise. Well, he said, I called Beverly and she told me where you were and gave me your phone number. Well, I said, well, that's nice. I said, well, obviously you called me for a reason. What can I do? And he said, well, Ted, he said, today the executive committee of the Board of Trustees voted unanimously for you to come back to Olivet and be the first full-time director of the Olivet Alumni Association. So he said, we want you back to start on August 15th, and your salary will be $7,500 a year. And I said, oh, my, Dr. Reed. I said, that's an honor. I said, I'm really blown away. But I said, I've got another nearly year to go in seminary, and I don't want to uproot my family. And I said, I'm afraid I'm going to have to turn that down due to the timing of it. And he cleared his throat. He said, well, I have already talked to the president of the seminary, and you can complete your schooling at the seminary in 2 summer school sessions. So we'll see you on August the 15th, and your salary will be $7,500. Well, I didn't know what to say. I thanked him, and I said, well, Dr. Reed, I'm flying back home Monday, and Bev and I'll pray about it. I didn't think I was going to do it. So got home, and Beverly said, Ted, you love Olivet. I think you ought to do that for a while. That'd be a good thing. So we felt clear on it, and I checked with the dean to make sure I could complete my seminary, my Master of Divinity, and in those 2 summer school sessions. So I called Dr. Reed back on Wednesday. And I said, Dr. Reed, this is Ted. Oh, Ted, yes, been thinking about you. Well, I said, thank you. I said, Dr. Reed, we have prayed, and Bev and I feel good about it, and we're going to accept your very fine, gracious offer. Good. But I said, Dr. Reed, I don't want you to feel bad towards me. But I said, I'm married and have a little girl, and we have to provide our own housing. Is there any way you could pay me $8,500 a year rather than the $75,000? And Pastor, he never took a breath. He said, Ted, we're glad you're coming. We'll see you on August the 15th, and your salary will be $7,500.
I'm waiting to hear, we'll make it 9.
Yeah, I tell you, I've laughed over that boy. He made a decision, and that was it. He said it'll be $7,500. Yeah. But, I look back, and God was so good to us and stayed there all those years. And
you hadn't had a class on salary negotiation yet, had you?
Yeah, I had not had that. I'm just a pastor's kid. I didn't know anything.
Well, it's worth a shot.
God worked in wonderful and marvelous way. Brian, I'm sorry, but tell me tell me a little bit about your life. I mean, I met Cheryl and I met your kids, but I want to know about your call to the ministry.
I'll tell you what, there's no sense of me doing that because it'd be boring after all your stories.
It would not either. You're not a boring person. You've got life, son.
I love the fact that Dr. Reed already had your answers for you. You're like, hey, I'm I've already called ahead.
He
We've
did
talked over
everything.
this. Yeah.
When I had to be there, what my salary would be, had checked with the president to make sure I could finish in 2 summer school. He had it all laid out.
It reminds me of your story you told, if we have time to tell it in a minute, when Dr. Knight called you to be the DS.
Oh, yes.
Everything's already been taken
It's
care of.
already been taken care of.
All you got to do is say yes.
Just say yes. Yeah.
I'm an Ohio kid, born in Wadsworth, Ohio. Church family. That's all we've ever known is church.
Yeah.
I'm the second born out of 4 kids. I have an older brother who's also a pastor.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
He pastors our home church down in Ohio, in Norton, Ohio, and raised Free Will Baptist. I think I told you that.
Yeah, you did.
And then in '97 is when I went into the Nazarene Church in Moorhead, Kentucky, and pastored there for almost 16 years.
Wow.
The
And that was your first pastorate in the Church of the Nazarene.
first pastor in the
And
Church of the
stayed
Nazarene.
16 years.
Yes.
That
Yes, sir.
tells me a whole lot about you, Brian
Yes, sir.
Farmer. That's marvelous.
Well, we love. I love the church. I love the Church of the Nazarene through and through. I feel like it's all I've ever known. I love how I was raised as well.
Sure.
Don't get me wrong. I love the church. Period.
Yeah.
But I especially love. I got interested in church history, our church history, and the people that made it, and the people that did the things that they did, and that's why I enjoy getting to be with people like you who have done a lot, and you're humble about it. You don't ever carry your own flag and wave it. You have the right skill in delivering yourself, but you also realize God's done it through you.
Saved by God's grace.
Yes, sir.
And Brian, when you mentioned the Free Will Baptists, wonderful people.
Yes, sir.
Oh, my
Absolutely.
goodness. I know several Free Will Baptists. And I'm Nazarene. I mean, you're Nazarene. I love the Nazarene Church. Love our leaders. Love our general superintendents and all that.
Absolutely.
But one thing as I've traveled that's helped me to realize there's other people, many other folks out
Yes.
here that are not Nazarene, but they serve and love the same Jesus that we do.
Absolutely.
And, when we stand before God one of these days, and I don't want to get to preaching here.
No,
but
you can't. Go ahead.
I don't think he's going to say, okay, how long were you Free Will Baptist? How long were you a Nazarene? How long were you a Methodist? How long were you a Presbyterian? I don't think he's going to say that.
No.
I think he's going to say, do you love me? Did you love me? Let me see. Did you love me?
Yes.
I think we've got to stress that more and more. We've gotten, I don't know. We get these denominational labels out, and I love the church. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
I love the Nazarene Church. I love our doctrine.
Yes.
I really do. But
Right.
there's a lot of other people out here that love the same Jesus that we do.
I don't think there's going to be wings or segregation in heaven. If there are, I'm not sure it's going to be any worth going.
Boy, that's the truth.
And I know it won't be that
No,
way.
it won't be that way, and
No, sir.
I don't want it to be. So, where did you meet Sweet Cheryl, your wife?
We had, I was pastoring the first church that I pastored in Clinton, Ohio, was a Free Will Baptist church, and we had mutual friends that I didn't know of. One of my best friend in high school, lived about 40 minutes away from where I pastored, and he and his wife started coming to the church, driving that far, which blew me away. And his wife worked for Cheryl. Cheryl was a regional manager for an educational supply store for a lot of years.
Wow.
And she was the manager of the store. His wife was the assistant manager for it. They brought her to church one Sunday on Labor Day, 1994. And they were going to go into Amish country later on after they came to church that day. Well, my brother happened to be there with us, visiting from Tennessee. He preached that day, but she came to church with them out of the blue. And here's why I connect with you, because I can see how God works in your life.
Yeah.
I didn't have a plan. My plan was I'll serve you and go wherever you want.
Wherever you want.
And he has just dropped right into my life what I've needed to have. I told him, I whined around. I'm like, God, I'm never going to get married. All I do is work and pastor. Who in the world wants to be around this? And the good thing was they know what they're going to get, but that's also the bad thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that day, when she walked in, it was like, I knew it right then. I'm like, wow. And she talked to me.
She talked
she actually
to you.
spent time and
Wow.
talked to me, But then, then it just worked. I tell people that she wouldn't leave me alone until I asked her out, but that's not the truth. But
Well, I tell you.
So the rest is history.
We're both fortunate.
You better
that
believe
God
it.
brought these two ladies into our lives.
You better believe it.
Beverly was so impressed with Cheryl Sunday, and I was impressed with her. And she's a sweet. You got those two wonderful kids. And I don't know where I would be without Beverly.
Yes.
When I kind of get a little high and mighty, Yeah, she has a way of bursting the balloon and bringing me right down.
That's not an exclusive club. I'm with you in that one. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The balloon never gets too high. You so beautifully tell your story. But one thing I don't know if I've ever asked you: did you ever pastor?
I did. Yeah, that's another story. He grew up in the Parsonage. I told you that a while ago. My dad was a pastor. We had a man at Olivet who was president by the name of Leslie Parrott, Dr. Les Parrott. Written a lot of books, really smart guy. And used to be president of Eastern Nazarene College out in Boston.
Okay.
And so I worked for him for 3 or 4 years, and he and I had a great relationship. So he called me in one day, and he said, Ted, he said, you've got a master's degree, but he said, I want you to get a doctorate in higher education at Rochester, New York, Rochester University. I said, Dr. Parrott, I'm not an intellectual. I said, no, he said, you don't have to be. But he said, I want you to get that. So long story short, he made a couple calls, called a DS out there, Wilmer Lambert. He's in heaven now. Wilmer Lambert called me and said, Dr. Ted, I've got a church open, and I want you to come and interview, and I want you to come to Rochester Trinity Church of the Nazarene.
Wow.
And I said, well, who's been there? He said, Dr. Morris Wilson. I said, well, how long has he been there? He said, 47 years.
Oh, wonderful.
I said, I don't want to go. I said, I'm not going. No. He said, it's great. He'll be fine. He's not going to hurt you. I want you. Yeah. So, long story short, went out and met the board, and I accepted the call. And Morris Wilson stayed in the church, had 2 brothers on the church board, a sister-in-law on the church board.
Uh-oh.
But, when he was the best supporter I had.
That's good.
I've told a lot of pastors, now just because somebody pastored a long time and stays in the area, take them out for coffee, bond with them, love them, don't put them out in left field like they have got something wrong with them.
No.
So I had been there about 11 months. In fact, Beverly went a month before I did to get our daughter in school. And been there about 11 months. And Dr. Parrott called me and said, Ted, I'd already had it. At that time, you had a recall vote early. I'd already had a recall vote and got every vote but 2. So the church ran about 250. It was a good church. So he called me and said, you've got to come back. And I said, Doctor, I can't come back. I said, I'm here with these people, and you told me you want me to go to school. And he said, I know I did, but he said, we're having some issues, some problems, and I just need you to come back. So I said, no, I'm going to hang up on you. Mm-hmm. I'm not coming back. And so, friendly kind of way, I said goodbye. I hung up. So he kept calling me, and then V.H. Lewis, remember Dr. Lewis, V.H. Lewis? Yeah. He was the brother-in-law of the DS out there, Wilmer Lambert. He called me one day, and he ordained me, but I wasn't close to V.H. Lewis. So he asked about Beverly, and then he said, he always didn't smile much. He just was very sober and somber, And he said, Ted, Les Parrott's driving me crazy. He said, go ahead and go back to Olivet. He said, I'm going to call my brother-in-law, Wilmer, and tell him it's not your fault. But he said, he just needs you back there. There's some issues going on campus that he feels like he's got to have you to run interference for him on the region. So I resigned. Those people cried. I cried.
Oh, I bet.
Beverly cried. We really did. We liked it out there. Yeah. Debbie was doing well in school. And so I only pastored a year. To answer you, I gave you the long answer.
No, I like
I only pastored a year. Yeah. And when I became a DS, I think I told you this at lunch, I reminded the advisory board and the general superintendent of that. I said, guys, I've only pastored a year. You don't want a DS that hasn't pastored. But anyway, it all worked out. So
it didn't matter. They wanted you.
Yeah, that's yeah.
And so you pastored a year, and then you have a lot of good time at Olivet and alumni, and then the 16 years and 3 months in Indianapolis.
At Indianapolis, as district superintendent.
What did you miss the most about pastoring when you were a DS? I think I know the answer to that. But
bonding with the people, being with the people.
Yeah.
Because the DS, in fact, I was talking to the DS of the Michigan district, Kevin Hardy, who's a wonderful man, by the way. He pastored for 40 years, and he's struggling right now. He's going to make a good DS. But I told him, I said, Kevin, I know why you're struggling. I said, you were used to pastoring through the same people for 20 some years at that church out east. And I said, you preach to big crowds each Sunday. And I said, now the DS, you go to those, I hate to say it, but troubled churches that are running a small crowd, and then you don't bond. I mean, you're there for one Sunday, then you're gone.
Right.
And I said, you miss the people. You cry with them, you laugh with them, you dedicate their babies, you preach the funerals of their grandparents, you just like you do. You're a pastor. You're at the hospital when there's a major problem and surgeries, you're there. A DS, you don't have that. You just don't have that. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense, because that's what I kind of figured.
Yeah.
What did you do anything intentionally to try to fill that gap? Like, especially take the times when you were at church, or the times when the district met for a camp meeting or assembly or whatever? How did you fill that?
Well, I would meet with laymen for lunch as much as I could.
Yeah.
A lot of times on Sundays, I would invite a half a dozen laymen to go with the pastor. If he had some personal problems, some issues to talk about, I knew that beforehand. I didn't invite anybody.
Right.
But I tried to be with the layman as much as I could.
Okay.
In fact, it acts like I'm bragging on myself. I'm not. But I've got a friend who's a layman in Indianapolis, and he said to me a few months ago, he said, Dr. Lee, he said, you were my pastor. Now, he said, I had a good pastor, but he said, you pastored and ministered to me as well.
Yeah.
He said, you took me out to lunch several times when I was hurting. So I tried to fill that gap. Hospital, layman in the hospital, and I knew we had, Indianapolis. We had 10 hospitals in Indianapolis.
Right.
I would go call on them, see them.
Yeah.
Funerals, and I didn't do all the funerals. Pastors do most of the funerals. But I would go to the funeral home and be with the family. So I tried to serve as a pastor, so to speak, and not only be a pastor to my pastors, but to the laymen as well.
You don't lose that. That doesn't go away.
That does not go away.
And I dearly love the structure of our church, for sure, and how we have the lines of protection when a church doesn't have a pastor to have a DS.
Yes.
And all the way up to our generals. Love it. But my heart goes out to the men and women that have to go. Their lives change. Take, for instance, we take for granted at General Assembly, when we elect generals, you talk about life turning on a dime.
Oh, my goodness.
Right there.
Oh, right there.
And then they've just got weeks to transition into a worldwide position.
Yeah, worldwide position, because we're in 161 countries.
Right.
And, about 12 years ago, I was a delegate to that General Assembly, Brian. That's when we changed that. Used to, like the old-time generals, I mean, even when I say old-time, just 12 years ago, when they were elected general, they had 3 days to look at the notebook and and they would start in on district assemblies. They didn't have a time to do anything.
Wow.
And then they'd have to take a Sunday off to go back and resign to their people, but they were already started. But now there's like a 30 to 45 day interval before they have to start being a general superintendent, which is really a big help to them.
Absolutely.
But, you mentioned the polity of our church, and we're not perfect, goodness sakes.
Right.
But we do. When there's a pastor resigns, immediately the DS is there to work with the church board, the congregation, tries to put their hearts at ease that we're going to work together on this thing.
Right.
And I've thought a lot about, I've had quite a few people over the years that attend independent churches. Nothing wrong with that.
No.
But when their pastor resigns, I've had them to call me and say, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And I'd say, well, do you have a pulpit committee? Well, we're getting one together. And I said, well, you need to do that. Well, how do we get names? So, I mean, it's really a struggle. Now, I'm sure it doesn't happen that way every time.
Yeah.
But many of these independent churches, when their lead pastor leaves or goes to heaven, boy, they're in a real pickle, not knowing where to go and who to draw from.
Absolutely. It's good to have a system in place that can be trusted.
It really is.
It's why I'm here.
Yeah.
I knowing that God was kind of telling me, I need you to start searching and praying. It was just good to have a system to where you felt like you were putting some legs to your prayer by sending your resume places.
Brian, isn't that amazing? And it just, when you said what you did, God was preparing you for Cherry Grove before you knew anything about Cherry Grove. You
Yes,
didn't know
sir.
anything about Cherry Grove Church of the Nazarene.
Right.
But God was speaking to you
Yes, sir.
that your work was winding up where you were in Kentucky.
Mhm.
And, I think I told you this at lunch Sunday when I was appointed district superintendent, and I told Dr. Knight, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go.
I love that story.
And then I went down to meet the advisory board as a favor to him.
Yeah.
And because Beverly loved her job, director of student activities, resident director, she loved the kids on that campus. But when we got within 30 or 40 miles of home that night after I met with the leadership of that district, Beverly said to me, Ted, I know you don't want to be a district superintendent, but you better be very slow in turning this down.
Yeah.
For God began to speak to me 60 days ago and said there was going to be a major change in our lives.
Wow.
And I never told you that. Well, Pastor, I nearly put the car in the ditch. I thought she'd be the last one in the world.
Yeah.
I thought she'd say, okay, you can go to Indianapolis, but I'm going to stay here on campus.
Exactly.
But,
Exactly.
God dealt with her before he even dealt with me about that. So,
He works that way so often. And had you known, she was so gracious and faithful to keep that to herself.
To
between
herself.
her and God.
and I'm really glad she did.
Yes.
When I was a boy, little boy, my dad pastored Seymour, Indiana.
Okay.
Loved that church. It was a great church. They ran 300 or 400 people way back there at Old Seymour First Church. And had a great board. He loved the board. The church was growing. And one afternoon, he loved to call. He called on people all the time. So he came home one afternoon, and I was probably 7 years old. And my dad walked in, and my dad had been crying. And he said to me, son, go upstairs to your room. So I did.
Mhm.
And he told my mom, he said, Grace, he said, God spoke to me this afternoon. He said, I can take you to the place, and told me we're going to move. Well, she said, Ross, you love it here. He said, I know. I told God that. She said, where are we going? He said, I don't know. But he said, God told me we're going to move. 2 weeks later was the district assembly of Southwest Indiana District. At that district assembly, the DS of the Indianapolis district, J.W. Short, was at that assembly to visit.
Yeah.
And after my dad had given his report, J.W. Short sent a note by the page, the page boy there. And the note said, Ross, meet me in the back of the church. I want to talk to you. So my dad got up and went back in the back, and J.W. Short was a big old Texan, big tall guy. And he said, Ross, he said, I enjoyed your report. He said, want to tell you, I met the board at Richmond First Church last week, and they voted unanimously to extend an invitation to you, and I need you to pray about having a church vote. And I guess my dad broke down and cried.
I bet he did.
And he said, Reverend Short, I don't need to pray about it. He said, God told me 3 weeks ago I was going to be making a move.
Wow.
And Richmond First, sweet people, but it was a tough church compared to Seymour. I mean, it was
Sure.
not the best thing in the world, but he stayed 13 years there. So, but God works in incredible ways.
Well, he does.
Brian, I am
He
so
does.
sorry. I've dominated this television.
You're the reason this is on. What are you
I-
talking?
I-
Otherwise, I'd be sitting here talking to myself. I was
Oh,
counting
no.
on that.
My wife said, let him talk some. Don't you talk all the time.
I talk on every one of them. They don't need to hear from me.
Oh.
This is why you're on here.
Oh.
It's
Well, I tell you, and I'm repeating myself now, and I know that, but God's given you a great church here, a great
Yes, sir.
opportunity.
yes, sir.
We were a few minutes into your Sunday school class Sunday, and I guess a teacher couldn't get there, and you filled into that
Yes.
class Sunday and did a great job. But all those young couples in your church,
Yeah.
and kids. Now you got older people like me, and every church needs that. So that's a sign of a healthy church.
Yeah.
But you've got a great church here. You really do.
Thank you.
And I'm thrilled for what God's doing in the life of this church. And again, I said this at the very beginning. As an old DS, it doesn't take long for me to sense, are there problems? Is there dissension in that church? And who won't speak to one another? Boy, none of that here at Cherry Grove.
No.
No. The unity and the love and the laughter. Oh,
Yeah.
that just blesses me to death.
We can't wait to get together. You know, we the days are too long in between. It
Oh,
feels like.
I believe
Yeah,
that. If I
and it's
lived
good.
anywhere near here, I'll tell you where Beverly Lee and I'd be coming to church right now.
Hey, there's a house for sale down
Well,
at 55 here. You know, we
okay,
can buy it for
I
you.
need that. I need
We'll
that.
put you right in here.
Well,
You blessed us Sunday, and even though weather put it the way it was, I was real happy with as many that
Oh.
showed up, and I knew the message would be exactly what we needed, and I've not forgotten. I have my notes in the bulletin
oh my
on
goodness.
optimism. I can remember. You want to hear me tell a story? 2005
Yeah.
was the first General Assembly I ever got to go to. I was actually voted on delegate on our East Kentucky district
Oh, wonderful.
at the RCA Dome.
Yeah,
We're all
in
sitting on the
Indianapolis.
field
Huge.
there, in our
Yeah.
voting boxes and stuff there. And I remember looking over, and we're sitting there doing one of the days with things to do with resolutions in the manual. And the mic was open, and I heard Ted Lee,
Oh,
District Superintendent, Indianapolis District. And I go, wow, check that voice. That voice is from God right there.
oh,
And I want
brother.
to say that's probably the first time I had seen or heard from you or wherever.
Well, I know. I've had more people say, I don't know you, but I heard you at General Assembly make a speech
Exactly.
on something.
So for me, there's been two great privileges I've had being in the short time as a Nazarene. I've only been 21 years, isn't a long time in a denomination at all, but I think it is. I'm pretty happy about it.
Oh, at 20, that's more than 2 decades.
You and Dr. Thomas Johnson have been heroes. Stan Toller was a hero. Man. I got to meet and talk to him. God love him, and
You know,
it was a great loss there.
the Lord and I have had some talks about that.
Yeah.
Lord, he was right in the prime of life. Why did you have to take him to heaven?
Well, I tell you what.
I don't want to. I'm not questioning God, but
No.
he was a great man. I
Yes, he
love
was.
Stan Toller.
Yes, he was. He just getting to even take time. 5 minutes of his time was huge to me.
And he would give it to you too.
Absolutely.
I mean, oh yeah.
I have a
humble.
lot of his stuff.
And Tommy Johnson, his dad was a good old war horse, loved God and the church, and
Yes, he
Tommy,
was.
I love him. And
Several years ago, he and his wife did our Ministers and Mates retreat. And so they stayed over that weekend and got to preach here. Dr. Brown was still our DS. He said, hey, would he be able to preach Sunday morning? Because it wrapped up Saturday. It was over in Traverse City. I'm like, what do you mean, can I? I'll resign so he
you
can
had
preach.
Talmadge here.
And he came and preached before
Oh.
we added on here.
Yeah.
And got to go to lunch with him that day and have kept contact with him. And that, I can remember he did a teach conference way back in like
way back when,
1999 in Kentucky over at actually Columbus at the church
He was
over
a
there.
great Sunday school leader.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
Absolutely.
When I became just last year, I became maybe 2 years ago, whenever I became the SDMI director for our district, I got with him on Facebook and told him, I said, hey, you're one of the best Sunday school men I know.
Yeah.
So I'm going to need advice, and he's been a great help to me with that, for
he
sure.
would do anything in the world to help you. Yeah.
So I say that to have him get to preach here for us and spend time with him, and now get to call him a friend, and now to have you in my office sitting here drinking coffee,
man.
talking to me is a great highlight. So I'm the one that's blessed.
I just wish I'd have met you 20 years before is what I wish I'd have. Beverly and I talked about that. I said, Beverly, he's my kind of guy. And if we could have only met them, now I don't want to get outside the will of God, but I'd love to have had you in Indianapolis is where I wanted you.
You're very sweet to say that. I
Well,
appreciate that.
I'm serious. I'm serious.
Well, we're going to put this in the garage, but I want to ask you one thing to
Sure.
say. If you're talking to you pastored a year, if you pastor a day, you know what it's like to be a pastor. You're a pastor's kid. And from all your experiences being in the church as a district superintendent and the stuff you've said, what hurts my heart is seeing people, men and women who are in ministry and just struggling. What would you offer to someone in that case today?
Well, and you see it every day, Brian. I've always said to them, there is no promotion, men, women, outside of the will of God.
Right.
If you're pastoring a church of 500, don't think that's a bed of roses, because it's not. You're pastoring a church running 25 or 30, yet your salary's low, you're bivocational, but you are doing as much for God as the guy pastoring a church running 500.
Absolutely.
So there's that's number one of what I'm
Absolutely.
saying. There's no promotion outside of the will of God. Secondly, I think it's really important, and I failed some in this. I didn't get everything done that I wanted. I tried to get some of my larger church pastors. Now, when I say large, I'm talking about 150, 200 church. I tried to get them to mentor these pastors that are in the smaller churches.
Right.
Take them out to Bob Evans. Buy them breakfast once a month.
Mm-hmm.
Look them in the eye and say, hey, love you. Been praying for you.
Sure.
My wife and I are praying for you. That does more to encourage those small church pastors who are hurting and struggling, more so than even the district superintendent, because they say, well, that's your job.
Absolutely.
So I would say a mentoring program of the larger pastors to help them. And then number 3, picking up, I can't tell you the years, the 16 years, at 7:30 on Sunday morning, I would pick up the telephone driving down the road to my assignment somewhere, and I'd call, I'm not going to mention any names because they might get back to them, but I'd call some of these small church pastors,
Yeah.
and the phone would ring 2 or 3 times, and they'd answer the phone. I'd say, hey, this is your DS checking on you. Get out of bed. What's wrong with you? Church today. And they'd begin to laugh. And I'd say, just been thinking about you. Want to have a word of prayer with you. I can't tell you the notes I'd get back saying, you'll never know what that phone call. Now, I didn't do that once or twice. I did it nearly every Sunday,
Good.
across the district to
Good.
try to encourage. Now, I didn't call Indianapolis first. I did sometimes, but not often.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the smaller church pastor like you talked about that's struggling, because they see you, and here's Cherry Grove, a gorgeous church, a gorgeous facility. They think he doesn't have any problems. They have no idea. See,
No, it's not how it looks.
No, it's not
Anybody
how it
on the
looks.
front line has to dodge fire.
yeah,
That's for sure.
that's a good way to put it.
You got it. You got it.
Well,
thank
Brian,
you.
God's helped me. I've traveled, you've been all over, but I've traveled basically around the world.
Yeah.
I just got back from Thailand a year ago and
Okay.
preached over there. I preached in Korea. I preached all through Africa, preached in Australia. And I don't say that bragging. No. I'm giving God took this little kid from Indiana
I love that.
and let me have these kind of privileges and opportunities
Yes,
to
sir.
share the good news of God's love. Man, I'm just a preacher's kid. Believe me. And
It's the evidence of what happens when you totally give it to
Yeah,
God and let
yeah.
Him take your life.
exactly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you for letting me do.
It's
Everybody,
my
I
pleasure.
don't know you out there, but I sure do love you and hope to see you someday in heaven.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's our goal for sure, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Dr. Ted Lee, and the only thing I regret is that Beverly's not with us today, but she said, can Ted just do that?
Yeah,
And
she did.
I don't want her mad at me. So, but we appreciate both of you, and thank you for your friendship and your
Well,
love and your prayers. And
Thank you for your friendship, Pastor.
absolutely.
Really
Hopefully, you
mean
have
that.
many, many more days together.
Absolutely, and we will.
Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you.